Hey guys, it's Karenology. This one is pure chaos. You have to hear how it all went down. They broke into my house with fake badges, guns drawn, shouting about a mandatory compliance check. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. The second I saw their uniforms, cheap, unmarked, and mismatched, I knew this wasn't law enforcement. It was Homeowner Association thugs playing cops, and they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. I raised my hands just enough to look compliant while my mind raced. 4 of them. 1 at the door, blocking my only direct exit. 2 flanking my kitchen, their plastic badges glinting under the dim light. And the 4th, the leader, standing square in my living room, his stance too rigid, too controlled, ex-military, or at least someone who wanted to look like it. He had a clipboard in one hand, an obvious prop, and a gun in the other, which was far more concerning. "We have reason to believe you're in violation of multiple Homeowner Association policies," the leader barked. "We're conducting a routine search to ensure community compliance." I forced my expression into one of mild confusion, not alarm. "That's funny," I said, my voice steady, "because last I checked, homeowner associations don't have the legal right to conduct warrantless searches." The man didn't flinch. "Section 14C of your agreement states that all homeowners must comply with impromptu inspections by the HOA Enforcement Division. That's not a real law, maybe not in your world." And there it was, the arrogance, the absolute belief that they were untouchable. That was the problem with unchecked power. It made people reckless, stupid. I let out a slow breath, hands still raised. "Let me see the paperwork." The leader stepped forward and shoved the clipboard into my chest. I took it, scanning the text. It was an obvious forgery. The HOA logo was pixelated, the legal jargon sloppy, and the signature at the bottom was a blatant photocopy. Worse, it wasn't even a warrant. It was a made-up compliance notice with no legal backing. They weren't expecting pushback. They thought intimidation would be enough. I glanced at the man's gun, semi-automatic, safety off. They weren't just here to scare me, they were ready to escalate. I had dealt with worse in my career, but it had been a long time since I had to think like an agent. These men weren't trained operatives, but that didn't make them any less dangerous. The key to handling men like this was simple. Control the pace. Make them second guess. Keep them talking. I lowered the clipboard and gave a small, knowing smirk. "You guys really put a lot of effort into this, huh? The fake paperwork, the matching outfits, What is this, a 45? I motioned at his gun. "Nice touch." The leader narrowed his eyes. "You think this is a joke?" I tilted my head. "I think you're trying real hard to make me think you have authority that you don't actually have." A flicker of doubt crossed his face. Just for a second. But it was enough. The guy at the door shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should—" "Shut up," the leader snapped, not taking his eyes off me. He pointed the gun higher, right at my chest now. "You're gonna let us do our job, or this gets real bad for you." I sighed, shaking my head. "Here's the thing. I know for a fact that what you're doing is illegal. And I also know that the second you stepped into my house with weapons drawn, you committed a felony. Unlawful entry. Criminal impersonation of law enforcement. Oh, and if you actually pull that trigger?" I leaned in slightly. "You're looking at life in prison." The silence stretched between us, thick with tension. Then, from the hallway, a voice called out, "Everything okay, babe?" My stomach twisted. Emily. My wife. She had no idea what was happening. I saw the momentary flash of calculation in the leader's eyes as he realized he now had leverage. "Get her in here," he ordered one of his men. I took a half step forward, my muscles coiling. "Leave her out of this." The leader smirked. "That depends on how cooperative you are." The guy nearest to the hallway moved, and I had half a second to make a choice. I took it. In one swift motion, I grabbed the clipboard and swung it hard into the leader's wrist. His grip loosened on the gun just enough for me to twist it free. The moment I had control, I stepped back, keeping the barrel trained on all four of them. My pulse pounded in my ears, my instincts kicking in like muscle memory. "Drop your weapons," I commanded, my voice sharp. "Now." The leader hesitated, his jaw tightening. "You don't want to do this." I clicked the safety off. "Last warning." The man at the door was the first to comply, letting his gun clatter to the floor. The others hesitated, then followed suit. But the leader, he just stared at me, eyes calculating. He wasn't scared. He was thinking, plotting. And that meant this wasn't over. A slow grin crept across his face. "You have no idea what you've just started." I exhaled through my nose. "Neither do you." I kept the gun trained on them as I reached for my phone. One call to the local police, and this whole stunt was over. But just as I started dialing, the leader chuckled. "Go ahead. Call your cop buddies. See what happens." Something about the way he said it sent a prickle of unease down my spine. He wasn't bluffing. There was something bigger at play here, and that's when I knew. This wasn't just about me. The Homeowner Association was hiding something, and I was about to find out exactly what it was. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. My grip tightened around the stolen gun as the four men stared me down, their expressions a mix of anger and calculation. The leader, still grinning, shifted his stance slightly, the faintest twitch of his fingers betraying the thoughts racing through his mind. He wasn't afraid. That was the problem. He wasn't scared because he thought he still had the upper hand. I kept my stance firm, the weight of the gun steady in my hand. "You're going to walk out of here, right now, empty-handed." The leader chuckled under his breath. "You don't get it, do you?" His eyes flicked toward the hallway where Emily had called out moments ago. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." The implied threat sent a rush of cold fury through me, but I couldn't afford to let emotion take control. Not yet. "I suggest you don't finish that sentence," I said, voice low and steady. "Now move." The man at the door hesitated, looking between me and the leader. His hands twitched slightly, fingers flexing. He was waiting for a signal, a command. The leader exhaled through his nose, slow and measured, before giving a small, almost imperceptible nod. One by one they backed away, moving toward the front door. I followed, gun still trained on them, heart pounding. The moment the last man stepped over the threshold, I slammed the door shut and locked it. Then I moved fast. I grabbed my phone and dialed. The line rang once, twice. The power cut out. The house plunged into darkness, the only illumination coming from the weak glow of the street lamps outside. My jaw clenched. This wasn't random. They had cut the power. My phone, still in my hand, was useless. No signal, no Wi-Fi. They had planned for this. Emily's footsteps came down the hallway. "What's going on?" I turned, scanning the shadows, listening for any signs that they were still outside. They cut the power. She inhaled sharply. "What do we do?" I moved toward her, gripping her shoulders gently but firmly. "We're leaving. Now." She didn't argue. She nodded, already understanding the urgency. We moved quickly, grabbing only the essentials: wallets, keys, my old duffel bag that still carried more gear than a retired man should need. I was already mentally running through the next steps, thinking of safe places, exits, backup plans. But as I reached for the door, something stopped me. A single envelope slid under the door. I froze, pulse hammering as I bent down and picked it up. The paper was thick, expensive, no name, no markings, just an address scrawled across the front. Emily's breath hitched as she read over my shoulder. "What is that?" I didn't answer. I already knew. It wasn't just an address. It was a challenge, an invitation. They weren't just trying to scare me. They were taunting me. I exhaled slowly, mind racing. This wasn't just about me. They had planned for resistance, which meant they were hiding something bigger than a power play. I glanced at Emily, her eyes wide but resolute. "We're not running," I said, voice firm. "We're going to find out what they don't want us to see." Her fingers tightened around mine. Then let's go. We stepped cautiously into the night, my mind still playing through worst-case scenarios. The street was eerily silent. No neighbors peeking out of windows, no distant sounds of a television playing, just the hum of the wind through the trees. They had planned for this too, I realized. Isolated us. Ensured that if something happened, no one would be around to intervene. I scanned the road. The SUV they'd arrived in was gone, no sign of them lurking. But that didn't mean we were safe. I motioned for Emily to follow as we moved quickly toward the car, my free hand keeping a firm grip on the gun. The second I slid into the driver's seat, I locked the doors and started the engine. Emily was already pulling out her phone, trying to get a signal. Nothing. It's completely dead. I clenched my jaw. That's not normal. They're blocking it. She looked at me. How? Signal jammer, most likely. Small, portable, effective in a limited radius. Her hands tightened around her phone. So we can't call for help. Not until we get out of range. I threw the car into drive and pulled onto the road, taking the long way out of the neighborhood. No use driving straight onto the main road if they were watching. I needed time to think. Time to plan. We drove in silence for several miles, the city lights creeping closer. Then, finally, her phone buzzed. She exhaled in relief. We have signal. I'm calling the police. I hesitated. Something about this still felt off. Too easy, too clean. Wait, she frowned. What? We need to report this. We do, but not yet. I glanced in the rearview mirror. No sign of anyone following. If they planned this much, they probably have contingencies in place. The second we go to the police, we're giving them control of the narrative. We need to know what we're up against first. Emily stared at me, then nodded slowly. So where do we go? I tapped the envelope against the steering wheel. We pay them a visit. The address was etched in my mind. If they wanted to play games, I'd make sure they regretted it. The city lights blurred as we sped down the highway. The address from the envelope burned into my mind. Emily was quiet beside me, her fingers gripping the edge of the seat, her eyes darting toward the side mirrors as if expecting headlights to appear at any moment. I understood the feeling. Every instinct in my body told me we were being watched, followed, manipulated into making a move we hadn't fully thought through. But there was no turning back now. I kept my hands steady on the wheel, my mind racing ahead to what we might find at the location. The Homeowner Association had played their hand tonight, and I had countered. But this wasn't checkmate yet. They wanted me to show up. That much was obvious. The real question was why. Emily finally broke the silence. What if this is a trap? I exhaled through my nose. It's a trap. That's not the question. The question is what kind. She turned her head toward me, her expression unreadable. And we're just going to drive into it? We don't have a choice. If we run, they keep coming. If we go to the police, they twist the narrative. We need leverage. We need to know what they're hiding. She chewed on the inside of her cheek, but didn't argue. She understood. She always had. That was one of the reasons I married her. The address led us out of the main city, past the suburbs, into an area where streetlights became sparse, and the only signs of life were the occasional gas station or 24-hour diner. The road turned rough beneath the tires, cracks and potholes jarring through the suspension. I slowed the car as we approached a gated property, its only marker a rusted mailbox with peeling numbers. The gate was already open. I killed the headlights, rolling forward slowly, my eyes scanning the darkness ahead. A warehouse. That's what it looked like. Large, industrial, a relic from a time when this area had been more than just forgotten land. There were no lights inside, no signs of activity, but that didn't mean we were alone. Emily reached into the glove compartment, her fingers wrapping around the small revolver I had stashed there years ago. She had never needed to use it. I hoped tonight wouldn't be the first time. We stepped out of the car, moving carefully. The gravel crunched under our feet, loud in the stillness. The wind had picked up, whistling through the skeletal remains of an old fence. My pulse was steady, but my senses were on high alert. If anyone was watching, they would make their move soon. I reached the door first, testing the handle. It gave way too easily, swinging inward with a creak that set my nerves on edge. Emily and I exchanged a glance, then moved inside together. The darkness swallowed us whole. I flicked on the flashlight from my phone, sweeping the beam across the interior. Empty crates, dust-covered tables. The scent of oil and rust hung thick in the air. But there was something else. Something just out of place enough to make my skin crawl. Emily saw it too. Over there. She pointed toward the far wall, where a desk stood alone, cleared of dust, as if it had been used recently. A single laptop sat open on its surface, its screen black, but humming faintly with power. A message was taped to the keyboard. I stepped closer, my breath slowing as I read the words. "You're not as smart as you think." I barely had time to register the words before the warehouse exploded into light. Floodlights, blinding, searing. A metallic clang behind us, the door slamming shut. The unmistakable sound of a bolt sliding into place. Emily inhaled sharply, spinning toward the noise. I grabbed her arm, pulling her close, my mind already calculating options. The sudden brightness was disorienting, but I forced my vision to adjust. Shadows moved beyond the glare. Figures. At least 6, maybe more. Silent. Waiting. A voice echoed from a speaker above us. "Did you really think we wouldn't be watching?" It was him, the leader from before. The same smooth arrogance, the same barely restrained amusement. My jaw clenched as I turned, scanning for cameras. There. A small red light blinking from the corner of the ceiling. "Let's cut to the chase," I called out, keeping my voice even. "You went through a lot of trouble to get me here. What do you want?" The voice chuckled. "Oh, it's not about what we want. It's about what you've already done." Emily stiffened beside me. I didn't take my eyes off the camera. "Enlighten me." A pause. Then, the sound of a computer booting up. The laptop screen flickered to life, displaying grainy footage. A house. My house. The view from a street camera. The footage sped up, timestamps jumping forward in increments. Then, a black SUV pulling up. The fake HOA officers stepping out. The confrontation. Me taking the gun. Me holding them at gunpoint. My stomach dropped. They had the whole thing, from an angle that made it look exactly like I had been the aggressor. Emily muttered under her breath. "They set this up. They wanted you to fight back." The voice from the speaker confirmed it. "It's amazing what a little editing can do, isn't it? With the right cuts, the right narrative. Well, let's just say you're not going to look like the upstanding homeowner anymore." My grip on the gun tightened. "So what's the play here? You try to blackmail me? Force me to stay quiet?" "Not quite. See, you had your chance to leave this alone. You didn't take it. So now we make an example of you." The lights flickered. A new sound cut through the air. Sirens. Distant, but growing closer. A cold realization settled into my bones. They had called the cops, and when they arrived, all they would see was the footage, the conveniently placed gun in my hand, and 2 very, very guilty-looking people standing in the middle of a break-in. I turned to Emily. "Run." Her eyes widened. "What?" "Now get to the car." She hesitated for only a fraction of a second before nodding and sprinting for the door. I turned back to the camera, exhaling slowly. "You made a mistake," I said. The voice hummed with amusement. "Oh, and what's that?" I smiled. "You think I'm out of options." Then I lifted the gun and shot the camera out. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse, a sharp crack against the metal walls. Sparks flew from the shattered camera, its red light dying instantly. The voice over the speaker cut out mid-sentence, leaving only the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. For the first time since stepping into this trap, I had control of the silence. I turned and ran. Emily was already outside, the sound of gravel crunching beneath her hurried steps. The sirens were closer now, wailing through the night, bouncing off the emptiness of the industrial lot. She threw open the car door, hands shaking as she fumbled with the ignition. The engine roared to life just as I slid into the passenger seat. "Drive." She didn't hesitate. The tires spun against the loose gravel before catching traction, propelling us forward just as flashing red and blue lights appeared on the horizon. I twisted in my seat, eyes scanning the rearview mirror. 2 patrol cars, maybe more behind them. They were coming in fast. Emily's knuckles whitened against the wheel. "What do we do?" I reached into the glove compartment, pulling out a burner phone I had stashed long ago. "We stay ahead. We find out where this leads." "They're framing you," she said, voice tight. "They planned everything. The footage, the police." "I know. You think they've got someone inside the department?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We both knew the answer. The road stretched ahead, a narrow highway leading back toward the city. The speedometer climbed, the tires gripping tight against the pavement. The patrol cars behind us weren't trying to force us off the road. Yet. They wanted us to stop, to surrender. That wasn't going to happen. Emily glanced at me, jaw set. "If they catch us, they'll make sure no one hears our side. That's why we don't let them catch us." I flipped open the burner phone, scrolling through pre-programmed numbers. One in particular stood out. A contact I hadn't used in years. Someone I swore I'd never call again. I pressed the button and held the phone to my ear. A single ring, then a voice, sharp and clear. "I was wondering when you'd call. I need a favor." A chuckle. "You always do. This is different." "It always is." I exhaled sharply, glancing at the police lights closing in behind us. "They're setting me up. I need a way out. I need proof." A pause. Then, "Meet me at the old rail yard. 1 hour. Don't be late." The line went dead. Emily shot me a look. Who was that? Someone who hates the people framing me almost as much as I do. She didn't question it. Instead, she pressed the gas pedal harder. The needle climbed past 90. The city loomed ahead, the outskirts dotted with abandoned buildings and empty parking lots. The old rail yard was just beyond the industrial district, a maze of rusted train cars and forgotten tracks. If we could get there, we could disappear long enough to find out what we needed, but the cops weren't giving up. The first siren blared right behind us, the spotlight flashing through the rear windshield. A voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Pull over now!" Emily didn't slow down. "How far?" 10 minutes, maybe less." A second car pulled alongside us, trying to cut us off. I gritted my teeth. They weren't playing by the book anymore. I rolled down the window, reaching for the small emergency bag under my seat. My fingers found the handle of a flare gun. Not ideal, but it would do. Emily glanced at me. "You're not serious." "I need them distracted." I aimed at the road ahead, just past the lead patrol car, and pulled the trigger. The flare ignited, a burst of red-orange streaking across the asphalt. The car swerved hard, tires screeching as the driver overcorrected. It was just enough. Emily took the gap, accelerating past them. The old rail yard came into view, shadowed beneath towering steel bridges. Emily veered off the main road, kicking up dust as we hit the gravel. The patrol cars hesitated at the turn, unsure of the terrain. That hesitation was all we needed. We skidded to a stop near an abandoned warehouse. I threw open the door, scanning the darkness. Footsteps echoed against the concrete. A figure stepped out of the shadows, hands tucked into the pockets of a long coat. He looked exactly the same as I remembered, grizzled, lean, and watching me with the eyes of someone who never truly trusted anyone. "Took you long enough," he muttered. I didn't waste time. "They have footage. They cut the power. They set the whole thing up. I need to flip this before they bury us." He nodded once. I figured as much. Emily stayed by the car, keeping watch. Can you help us? A slow smirk. Depends. You still as good as you used to be? I exhaled. Better. He turned, motioning for us to follow. Then let's take them down. The air inside the abandoned warehouse was thick with dust and the scent of old machinery. Dim light filtered through broken windows, casting long shadows across rusted beams and forgotten crates. The man standing before me, the one I had called for help, crossed his arms and studied me with sharp, calculating eyes. You look like hell, he muttered. I exhaled. Yeah, well, it's been one of those nights. Emily stood close by, her arms wrapped around herself, eyes darting between us. The distant sound of sirens had faded, but we knew it was only a matter of time before the Homeowner Association's reach extended even here. They had turned the police against me, staged the footage, and were prepared to bury me under falsified charges. We needed to move fast. The man, his name was Cole, sighed and motioned for us to follow. I've been tracking these people for a while now. I knew they were dirty, but setting you up like this? They're getting reckless. Desperate. Emily frowned. Why? What's their end game? Cole led us toward an old desk covered in maps and printed documents. He pointed to a series of financial statements, ownership records, and hidden transactions. It's not just about power. It's about money. This HOA isn't just running a neighborhood. They're laundering money through property acquisitions, inflating prices, forcing people out, and reselling at a profit. The second anyone fights back, they disappear. Or worse. My stomach tightened. So they were trying to do the same to me. Cole nodded. But you fought back harder than they expected. That's why they escalated. They needed to make an example of you. Emily clenched her fists. We can expose them. If we can get this to the right people. Cole cut her off with a shake of his head. Not that easy. You take this to the cops, it vanishes. You take it to the press, they get bought off. These people have deep pockets, and they've been covering their tracks for years. You need undeniable, in-their-face, bulletproof proof. Something so public, so irreversible, they can't suppress it. I scanned the documents again, then looked at the laptop sitting beside them. An idea started to form. We don't just expose them. We let them expose themselves. Cole raised an eyebrow. Go on. I tapped the laptop screen. They have surveillance systems, right? Security feeds, internal logs, transaction histories. If we can access their own data and leak it in real time, we don't need to convince anyone of anything. We let their own records do the talking. Cole's smirk was faint but approving. You're thinking like an operative again. Emily looked between us. So where do we find this data? Cole leaned against the desk. Their main office. It's locked down tight, but I know a way in. We just need a distraction. A plan started to take shape. Leave that to me. 3 hours later, we were parked outside the Homeowner Association's headquarters, an imposing building that sat comfortably on the outskirts of town. It looked like any other corporate office, but beneath the polished exterior was a fortress designed to keep secrets buried. Emily and Cole waited in the alley behind the building while I walked toward the front entrance. I had called in an anonymous tip about financial irregularities, just enough to pique interest, but not enough to tip them off. The local news crew was already setting up outside, their cameras rolling as they waited for a statement from the HOA. The perfect smokescreen. Inside, the lobby was exactly as I expected. Sterile, professional, fake. The receptionist barely glanced at me as I walked past. A security guard stationed near the elevators shifted but didn't move to stop me. I moved fast, heading toward the stairwell. Cole's voice crackled in my earpiece. You're clear. Keep moving. We're almost in. Emily was in position, working remotely to access the building's systems, while Cole navigated the electrical panels. My job was simple. Get to the server room and plug in the drive that would pull everything we needed. The door to the server room was locked, but I had come prepared. A quick swipe of a stolen key card, and a little force was all it took. The hum of the machines inside was deafening, the blinking lights casting eerie reflections across the polished floor. "I'm in," I whispered. "Good," Emily responded. "Plug it in now. We need at least 5 minutes to download." I inserted the drive, watching as lines of code flooded the screen. The files were decrypting, the logs transferring in real time. Everything we needed, transactions, emails, proof of bribery, was there. Then the alarms went off. Cole's voice turned sharp. "You've got company. 2 guards headed your way." I yanked the drive and shoved it into my pocket just as the door burst open. The 2 men were armed, dressed in the same corporate security uniforms as the ones who had stormed my house. "Step away from the terminal," one of them barked. I raised my hands. "Boys, let's not do anything rash." The second guard radioed in. "We found him." Time was up. The glass behind me shattered as Cole fired from outside, the bullet embedding itself in the metal panel near the door. The distraction was all I needed. I lunged forward, knocking the gun from the nearest guard's grip and slamming him into the desk. The second guard tried to grab his weapon, but I was faster, twisting his wrist until the gun clattered to the floor. Emily's voice crackled through the comms. "Get out now! We have everything!" I ran. Down the hall past the stunned receptionist, into the chaos of the lobby where the news crew was still waiting. The guards chased after me, but as soon as I burst through the doors, they skidded to a stop. Cameras turned, microphones lifted, and suddenly the HOA had a bigger problem than me. Live on television, the reports were coming in. The files had already been leaked. The corruption was unraveling in real time. I didn't stop running until I reached the alley, where Emily and Cole were waiting in the car. I jumped in, breathless. "Drive!" Emily hit the gas, and as we sped away, I glanced at Cole. "That proof bulletproof enough for you?" He smirked. "Yeah, I'd say they're finished." The HOA was done. The evidence was out, the leaders exposed, and the entire operation collapsed under its own weight. The people they had oppressed for years would finally see justice. Emily let out a long breath, gripping my hand. "It's over." I squeezed back. "Yeah, it is.